any entrepreneur who starts a company, what they're trying to build is an infrastructure, okay, that can then generate revenue that is more than the infrastructure costs so that it builds profit. And once you have profit, that's when you have a sustainable company. You're left with a pretty scary percentage in terms of, okay, out of the 10% that made it past the startup phase, only 4% of those are going to exceed $1 million in revenue. I don't know a better way to say it other than I think most of us don't start companies to sell, $500,000. Like, we're trying to grow a business, right? If you wanted to get to that $1 million, there's a much better way through acquisition. Maybe you're much more innovative and entrepreneurial and you want to acquire a company that has the existing customer base of a product that you want to build.
It's time for another episode of the Cold Start Project about the unexpected challenges of growing businesses. I'm here with Walker Deibel. He is the author of, I'm going to read this out, Buy Then Build, How Acquisition Entrepreneurs Outsmart the Startup Game. This is a book that came out and was so instantly it's just awesome. And Forbes even said it was one of the top 7 books all entrepreneurs must read. Okay, so I think you should pay attention to it. And he has bought over 7 companies in the last 10 years, and his book is being used in universities as a textbook and that. So Walker, thanks for being here. We've been waiting a while, some months for it.
Jason, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
It is really, really cool. We chatted a little bit before we got started here. So the big idea here is that instead of trudging through the awfulness of the startup world, in which you can die in a myriad of ways, why not acquire a business that has already figured out all these things, right? That how to drive revenue, who their target market is, what those people will actually buy, what price point, and hopefully profitable delivery, right, of this product or service. Why not go and grab that? Because what you really want if you're owning a business is an income stream, right? And so it's better to acquire something that is producing revenue already from this point of view than go through all those painful and frequently unsuccessful processes of building from nothing. And yet people have this belief, myself included before I learned about certain techniques like leverage buyouts and things that you talk about, that you need to have tons of cash available. You must have to have $1 million or $2 million to be able to buy some existing business. What do you say about that belief?
Wow, there's so much in what you just said to unpack that I feel like I could talk for an hour based on that. But let's get right to that. Let's get right to the end. Well, let me back up just a little bit and unpack something you mentioned in there, which is I think that not every startup or every entrepreneur should be approaching an acquisition entrepreneurial beginning. Okay, I think that most entrepreneurs are really not going from 0 to 1. They're sort of starting a business around what it is that they want to do. An example that may or may not be relevant to your listeners is I'll often see someone who's skilled at search engine optimization start another SEO company here in St. Louis, and it's like, well, there's already 12 or 24 of them. Like, why another one? Well, because I'm good at it and I want to do it. I'm going to go try to hack away at it. Okay, fine. So it sounds techie and new, but the truth is it's already a mature industry where it is. In the same regard, only 4% of companies in the United States ever exceed $1 million, right, in annual revenue. And when you add to that the fact that 10% of startups make it past the startup phase, you're left with a pretty scary percentage in terms of, okay, out of the 10% that made it past the startup phase, only 4% of those are going to exceed $1 million in revenue. And I don't know a better way to say it other than I think most of us don't start companies to sell $500,000. Like, we're trying to grow a business, right? So the thing, and furthermore, if you wanted to get to that $1 million, there's a much better way through acquisition. So maybe it's through an exact fit for what it is that you want to build, or maybe you're much more innovative and entrepreneurial and you want to acquire a company that has the existing customer base of a product that you want to build, right? We can unpack all of that. if you want to. But to answer your question, I obviously have started businesses in the past, and I work with, I'm in a lot of entrepreneurial communities, and I got to the point where I'd be introduced to somebody, and other entrepreneurs would sort of introduce me as, oh, this is Walker. He buys and sells companies, which started to feel like, boy, not only do I feel like I'm, doing trading cards and not actually practicing, like the hard work that is entrepreneurship, but, I always got this sort of glance that was sort of like, oh, it must be nice to be super rich or have a super rich, family or whatever. That's not the case. The truth is that, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, is lending up to 90% of an acquisition purchase to individuals, right? And so the thing is you need to come up with about 10% of the transaction amount. And with multiples, somewhere in the, 2.5 to 4 times, adjusted EBITDA or seller discretionary earnings. Let's back way out earnings, the cash flow to, benefit to the owner. You're talking at, a 3-year return or a 4-year return. And, you need to come up with a certain amount of cash that is equivalent to the average down payment of a house in America. In other words, you can buy one of the largest 4% of companies in the United States with less than $100,000 and typically closer to $65,000, or you simply need to raise that amount of capital from people you know.
Nice. So nowhere near as difficult as you think. I can remember the first time I bought a car, monthly payments. Actually, I leased it. And I thought, before I went into dealerships and started looking around, I had this idea that it was so much money and I would never be able to afford it. And then you find out it's just a few $100 a month, right? For a new car. Like, wow. So, and this was some years ago now, when I still had hair, but.
Well, Jason, the difference, there's also a small difference between those two things, which is not only, not only does it come into perspective because it's based on historical earnings, but the truth is that business is going to pay that principal and interest loan back. True. As long as you don't screw it up, right? I mean, it's really important that you can buy a business that fits you, but your car doesn't pay that couple $100 payment.
Right. No, the car is a depreciating asset. The business is a money producing asset, revenue producing asset. So very important.
Just one more thing, at the risk of beating this to death, there's one more comparison I want to draw, which is, some listeners might be like, oh, dropping $100,000, that still sounds like a lot of money. And that's fine. But what I would say is that if you're looking to start a business, it's going to take some, minor amount of capital investment. And the average startup is started with about $67,000 in cash infusion. And I'll stop there. We can talk about.
Well, and let's not forget that that's the salary of one talented person a year. That's it, $65,000 to $100,000. And anybody who questions that 4% $1 million mark figure, I've been sharing the heck out of that Vern Harnish revenue plateaus picture ever since I saw it in the book. I went and took a picture of it with my cell phone, and it's everywhere that I am. There's that thing, even going back to Think and Grow Rich, which some people hate and some people love, but there's a chapter in there on accurate thinking. And even if you don't like that, just like the Think and Grow Rich thing, take away the accurate thinking part of it, which is, what is the reality of the situation here? What is the car cost? What are the actual numbers for startup risks and failures? So let's move on here to the next question, which is, what is the biggest yeah but you've encountered from people who have read your book?
Good one. I think that, it's along the course of 2 lines of thinking. One of them is, I do have a 1-star review out there on Amazon. If you look at the majority of reviews, people seem to like it. If you look at Goodreads, people seem to like it, but I've got this one out there, and I was really excited to get it because I always believe that if you only get, high rated reviews, then you weren't getting enough readers. But when I read it, I was a little disappointed because it's something that I hit on in the book, which is, that my definition of earnings does include the salary to the owner operator.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is you truly have to understand how earnings is being defined. It's not, net profit on some publicly traded company. It's a different measurement for, $1 to $20 million privately held companies. It's measured differently. But the other component to that is that, a second ago I just breezed over, oh yeah, with under $100,000 you can go buy one of these large businesses. And the truth is that in what I just explained, there's a 90% leverage, debt component that you have a personal guarantee on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is it's not like you're using someone else's money like a startup entrepreneur is who goes out for a capital raise. But it's also one of those things that I firmly believe and have experienced, that when entrepreneurs use other people's money, let me say it like this, Jason, and this is totally unfair from one line of thinking, but it's close to how I think about it. A lot of these entrepreneurs raise capital, they put none of their own capital at risk, and then they take a salary off of the capital they raised. How can you call that an entrepreneur? I mean, I do, and I agree with it, but really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's basically the definition of an employee. It's just that you have an idea that, the company's letting you run with, okay? And so a lot of times, as I see startups kind of starting to fall apart, behind closed doors, you'll see those co-founders kind of going, okay, well, we need to start looking for jobs while we still have, enough burn rate left for a couple of months. And it's like, what? I mean, there's a disalignment between the startup entrepreneur and the capital they've raised. And I think that if you are ready to invest in yourself, then, going ahead and getting access to the capital that you need in order to, acquire your own business is a thing that you need to be able to do. And I think that startup entrepreneurs are at a disadvantage not being able to do it. But Jason, to your point, it adds a high level, a certain amount of risk to the scenario. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs out there will, I don't want them to look, debt will either make you bankrupt or make you very rich. But it has to come down to what business is right for you, and also looking at the historical returns of SBA lending. In other words, about less than 1% of startups make it past the startup phase and exceed $1 million in revenue, whereas there's less than a 2% failure rate in SBA lending over decades. So the thing is that you're pulling capital from an organization that has an extremely good batting average, and once they're backing a project, I think there's a certain amount of confidence that can go into that.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. What about, let's personalize this for our space audience for a moment. What if you're a startup space founder, wannabe, you haven't created a company yet, but you understand the capabilities. Now, this is a mistake that I see people make all the time in this field, is they think just by having a brainwave and going out and creating a capability, say for a new type of propulsion or something like that, right? The market's going to just come cluster around them and, come on, I want to buy that, right? No, that is not the case. But let's say you had that idea that you wanted to change the universe, and so by following Buy Then Build, you would look for a company that is already in that area and had customers and interest and letters of intent, maybe, or something at least, and go by that, and then maybe hire on a few other pieces to give you the technical expertise that you wanted. What about culture fit, though? How do you make sure that the idea that you had in your mind of the organization that you wanted to build, like I was very clear with Cold Star about our values and what kind of organization that I wanted to build. How do you make sure that you go out and get that out of the company that exists already in the real world? And what if there is a bit of a divergence there?
Gosh, what an insightful and great question, Jason. I guess I would say this. I want to tackle that a couple of different directions. First, I would say that in the first part of your question, you were talking about, acquiring this infrastructure.
Mm.
And let's look at what that is for just a moment. In other words, any entrepreneur who starts a company, what they're trying to build is an infrastructure, okay, that can then generate revenue that is more than the infrastructure costs so that it builds profit. And once you have profit, that's when you have a sustainable company, okay? If part of that infrastructure is, the component that you're looking for, or the customer base, or the supplier network, or whatever that key part is that's important to you, another part of it is also going to be the personnel that transfers with that business, right? So my answer is slightly existential in saying, we've all seen the movie Moneyball, right? Or read the book Moneyball. And I think that, sabermetrics, as it's called, I call this entremetrics. In other words, don't swing for the fences, work on getting on base, right? And I think that, simply by saying, all right, we have the revenue, we have the customers, we have the infrastructure, we have the personnel, and we have the profits to be sustainable, gets you on base immediately. Then it starts to get into the details, like, okay, there's a culture thing, and truth be told, it takes time, Jason. It takes a lot of time to go from, Jason started a company to Walker's buying it and taking it over, and is going to kind of lead it this way. It takes years. The other thing, though, is that if you are growing through acquisition, in other words, you already have an infrastructure and you already have people and you already have a culture, the number one reason why acquisitions in growth scenarios don't actually capitalize on the value that they predicted was because of culture reasons, right? So in other words, we'll see what happens, but we all love Amazon right now, right? I mean, we're coming off of, the holiday season, and Amazon can do no wrong once again. But they're essentially a Walmart kind of scenario. They acquired Whole Foods, which has a very, very different, empowered employee first kind of culture. So, I'm not on the inside, but it's a story that I'm very interested to see how it unfolds. Pulling that around full circle, I would recommend that if you are going to buy a business, that business will be created out of the image of the owner or entrepreneur that's running it. Okay. And make sure that you fully trust that person, right? Because I think that the people that have failed at acquisition entrepreneurship, in retrospect, they always say the same thing. At least I hear it, which is, my intuition was that, this guy was a little off. But I just sort of thought that was him and he was the problem and I'm going to come in and fix it. And then I got in there and I realized my intuition is right. The whole company was built in his image, and, the thing doesn't kind of work out. It hits the rocks pretty quickly. So.
Okay. Great answer. It shows me what I need to know. You can't afford to be second best. You need to be first, and that requires speed. Now, if you're thinking that growth is supposed to be slow and steady, frankly, the way I was taught back in the 90s in the operations management and business administration programs, you are too slow. We have to adapt. And in space, it's no different than anywhere else. People like to think they're special in space, and it is fun, all the stuff we get to work on, but business is business. The fundamentals nowadays are conservative growth is not good. You need to run as fast as you can and risk outstripping your supply lines, which means in our world, using up the capital that we've got. That's a risk. But there is no prize for second place. There certainly is no prize for third. If you want to scale operationally fast, come talk to us at Cold Star Tech. We are the process experts for scaling fast. Now back to the interview. There's a question that I've got down here that I think is good here. Readers who I have enjoyed your book with have noticed that the math of business is really well covered in it. Okay. But operations does not seem to have been given as much importance, i.e. the flow charting and getting stuff written down about how the delivery of the product or service happens. Why is that?
So, Jason, let me ask you a question, which is, are you an operator?
Yes.
are you someone who might put together flowcharts?
Yeah, I might. It is a
So
process engineering centered business. So yes.
yeah. So in other words, it's a very specific question to you personally,
Hmm. Yeah, and I am going to
right?
filter it in. Sure. Yeah.
No, and I think that's perfectly fine. The thing is that what I was trying to do with Buy Then Build was, I spent a lot of years. I've attempted to start companies multiple times. In essence, I sort of have decided maybe I'm just a bad entrepreneur, right? But the thing is that I started figuring out what was working for me, and then I kept going back to starting, and it was like, well, why am I starting from scratch when I can, acquire and build from there, buy then build. And what I was trying to do was kind of wake up the entrepreneurial community to listen. There's a better way, right? For most of you, or there's a way that's being completely ignored, and yet
Mm-hmm.
it has such extreme benefits that it needs to be considered. And the thing is that there are 4 opportunity profiles. And one is sort of an eternally profitable business. One is a turnaround. One is a high growth business, and one is a platform company. So in your specific case, okay, and these take into consideration both growth potential and value potential. And in my book on page 65, I've even got the nice 4 quadrant model that you can see there. And the thing is that in a turnaround situation, operations are excruciatingly important. Being able to prioritize what needs to be done in what order, and project management is of extreme importance, right? A platform company for you being in operations is going to be tremendously different than a platform company with someone who has superior B2B sales skill sets, right? And so the thing is that what I try to do in Buy Then Build is help people understand, what everyone gets wrong when they do actually say, okay, I want to go out and buy a company, and then how to back up and sort of put the pieces in order correctly. And so for you, coming up with a target statement that is going to amplify your strengths and bring it to the company is going to look very different from another individual, right? And at the end of the day, it comes down to, what is it that you as an entrepreneur are bringing to the company? Because that is your growth opportunity. And the growth opportunity, as we've pointed out if you're pulling 90% debt, you better be planning on growing this thing, right? In my book. And as entrepreneurs, that's what we want to do. So you want to live the best life possible. And that means it's something that is amplifying your skill sets. It's something that you're all in on. And it's something that the activities of your day-to-day life are aligned with what it is that you want to be doing. One more thing, Jason, if I were to go into operations, I would also have to go into sales management. I would also have to go into online marketing. I would also have to go into financial engineering and everything else. And so the thing is that I tried to write a book that was, the best book that I could, that hadn't been written, rather than something that kind of, summarized other business books that are maybe out there.
Okay. So, and you've got an MBA. It's not like you're coming at this from a self-educated thing or something. Okay. Let's say you found a business that you want to buy where one partner is interested in selling, maybe even eager to sell, but other partners, maybe there's one, maybe there's two, are not so interested in getting out, or they're a bit, what the heck is going on here? Or maybe the other partners want a massive payment and they're gone, rather than the monthly ongoing payments until the large amount is paid off. What can you do to get progress started?
Okay. Great question. I think that, Jason, you asked very good questions. I think that, okay, short answer, you can't do anything. Okay. If a seller doesn't want to sell, it's not going to happen. And don't, just stop, walk away. I mean, make them want it at least, right? I also work as an M&A advisor with sellers of online businesses. And the thing is that like, I will spend often, months with them at a time, getting them sort of mentally ready. I had a call yesterday with someone who's exploring selling for the first time. And we sort of went through the entire business, gave them a valuation, and it wasn't it didn't align with his goal. And so then he was like, well, let's sell next quarter. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. If we're not going to achieve your goals, we don't even need to get started. And the reason is because I can get him to third base, but then he's not going to let us get home because it's not achieving his goal, right? However, more nuanced in your question is simply about deal structure, right? So in other words, you've got all these players at the table. Let's just say they all do want to sell and you can get it through. One's maybe playing a little tough, but maybe it's, positioning or something like that. Deal structure is more of an art than a science in that it's very specific to the deal and the personalities involved and what it is that they want out of it, right? And so I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, the sort of, business brokerage space is something that is opaque, it's fragmented, it's private. I mean, if one guy sells a business to another person, it's not published anywhere, like what was paid and at what valuation and what was included in that valuation, right? Like so all the information is incomplete. And so I spent a lot of time thinking, okay, well, it's ripe for disruption. How's this going to work? And as I have gotten more and more experience in helping other people buy and sell businesses, I've come to learn, maybe one day that day will come. It certainly will as we continue to evolve, but it is so far out there that it's just not going to happen in the next, let's say 10 to 20 years. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. Every deal has human components and specificities to it that is non-transferable to another one. They all kind of help in that experience, but you don't throw it out there and say, hey, I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom in this zip code, and like people know what it's worth. You have no idea. Right. So I guess what I would say is if we wanted to go into a case study, I'd be happy to work through that with you. But it's a little too generic to answer specifically. Give me a specific example, Jason. Let me kind of challenge you.
Well, it sounds like the right answer is to go get Chris Voss, Black Swan type, the hostage negotiation guy, and look for those real good leverage points on what would make this deal work, right? And you cannot, as you've said, you can't predict those things ahead of time. You have to engage and uncover them.
Well, you do your best. And the thing is that like, there's a lot of, search funds out there that are kind of running their own, what they'll call proprietary outreach, trying to get deal flow in front of the brokers. And that's fine. But you're talking about people that are essentially on a full-time salary doing that. And they're basically doing the work of the broker. So the thing is that and they're going with the bird in hand approach. If you can be the bird in hand, then a seller is a lot more willing to sort of work with you if they're ready, but it's going to be a very, very inefficient process for the buyer. Okay. So in my mind, I always found success in if I just did all of my deal flow through the brokers that are working with the sellers, then they're the ones that have already put in the 6, 9, 12, 24 months working with the sellers so that they're mentally ready. They've got their valuation together and they know what to expect. And then, you need to just sort of leverage, for lack of a better description, I'll use comps in the industry for the industry that you're looking in. And, the advisor or the broker that you're working with should be able to provide those even to the buyers that will help sort of tell you, okay, here's the sort of acceptable range for what's realistic here. And if you're throwing realistic offers at sellers and they're just like playing hardball, then I don't know what to tell you other than don't fall in love with that business. Go find another one. But yeah, I mean, right. I mean, that's maybe a negotiation question.
I think that's where it goes. Okay. Well, I'm glad we explored that. And a complimentary interview to this one with Walker here is the one that I had with the broker, John Garuti. That's in the previous episodes of the Cold Star Project, and check that out, and it will be quite educational, and you will find that most business owners are very unhappy with the valuation that is eventually arrived at. They usually think it's going to be sky high, and it just ain't,
Can I speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Speak to that, because that's exactly it. That's exactly it. The first time that an entrepreneur gets at the valuation of their business, they're usually the wind is out of their sails a little bit. There's a psychological process they need to go through. And number one, it's because of the risk associated with these smaller companies, right? But the multiples that they're going for in the market. But the thing is that as entrepreneurs, we put everything we have into starting something, and we will bleed and sweat and exhaust ourselves. And at the end of the year, we have like $5, right? And then we do it again, and we get $500,000, and then we do it again, and we get $1 million, and then we do it again, and we get $1 million and $1. And, we all have shiny object syndrome. So we kind of start something new, right? And then we sort of say, well, okay, I built the value over here. I'm now selling $1 million. Let's go sell it. I put everything I got into this. And, and by the way, I just reinvested into this whole balance sheet asset that it has nothing to do with earnings. It's only as good as the earnings can generate. And so there's a disconnect between running a business, building it from scratch, reinvesting in it, and what the market value of that company actually is to a buyer.
Right. And I'll challenge people to go back and listen to this interview again once we're done, because you explained the infrastructure of what a business is supposed to do. And I don't think there's a lot of founders out there who really have that idea clear in their head. I might pull that out and use it as one of the introductory snippets that I put as a native video on Twitter or something like that.
Totally agree. It's like, what's the point of starting a business and why do they fail? It's like the point of starting a business is you've got to get sustainable. We can't all run around like, I'll harp on Amazon again. We can't all run like Amazon and just like burn cash for, a couple of decades because, we're not pumping in, millions of dollars in venture capital up front and, building something that's going to continue. Cool. We need it to get sustainable as soon as possible.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time. We have a hard stop today. So I want to ask you this question. I want to find out, who is the best kind of person to come and work with you? You've had a bit of success, quite a bit of success from this book and approach. And I'm curious, what kind of problems company owners now come to you for to solve and have you help fix? And also, do they come up with you with the right idea or the wrong idea of what it is that you do? Or are they pre-sold?
That's incredible. I think that most people have no idea what I do, and it's probably the hardest question to answer.
I have that problem.
At a cocktail party, people are like, "What do you do?" It's like, "Okay, have a seat," right? But so I spend probably half my time, and you'll see these percentages don't add up, but I spend probably half my time helping online entrepreneurs exit their businesses, as well as the buyers of those businesses buy them. Okay. But then I spend the other half of my time, I'm building out a new program with Buy Then Build. The number one question I get is, so, do you help people like find a business and buy it? And my answer has always been no, because there's no good way to charge for that. And if you read the book, I actually don't believe in buy-side advisors. They're completely inefficient. They're very expensive, but they have to charge it because they make so much money when they're doing transactions that there's no other way to compensate for it. So for the average, wannabe acquisition entrepreneur, it's completely unaffordable. I'm building a new product right now, and it kind of goes like this, Jason. And at the risk of pitching, I don't mean to. I'm just sort of explaining the opportunity.
Say the thing. That's what I asked. Yeah.
So there's essentially 10 schools that teach entrepreneurship through acquisition. All 10 of them, it's the number one MBA elective course. It's Stanford, Harvard, University of Chicago, Columbia, Northwestern, Wharton, London Business School, INSEAD, Darden. You get the picture, right? University of Illinois is just launching theirs. I think they're number 10, maybe number 11. It's the top business schools in the world. What about everyone else, right? So I've brought in a curriculum developer to help me take my what I'm considering now to be my minimum viable product that's out there and just build a world-class, online program. We're coupling that with, group coaching, some elaborate tools that I've put together, and ultimately community around helping entrepreneurs sort of get from, 0 to 80% in terms of, I guess 100% if that's a transaction. The thing is it's really important to me that I don't want people to decide that they want to buy a business so badly that they make a bad decision, right? So it's one of these things where you don't want 100%. I don't want to strive for 100% success rate, because it'll probably result in some people being in a bad situation or something that they felt they needed to do because their mother-in-law didn't understand what they were doing and they just needed a job or something. So those are the two things I'm working on. And of course, I said the percentages don't add up because I spend another amount of time on I still own two companies that I own and operate. So that'd be over 100% of my time. So.
Right. Well, we all know how much we work.
Right.
It is ridiculous. Awesome. Well, Walker Deibel, the author of Buy Then Build, you can get that on Amazon like I did. And also, where can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to do that if they're like, hey, I like what I hear and maybe he can help me?
Sure, Jason, thanks. I've got buythenbuild.com has a ton of free resources for anyone interested in taking a step further.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot for being here today. Hey, this is Jason Kanigan, the host of the Cold Star Project and the founder of Cold Star Technologies. I've decided to do something new. I've started doing daily update videos on who I met and what I learned the previous day in the space field. And it's a great sort of follow me thing. You can learn what I learn. I'm meeting a heck of a lot of people and learning a lot of things really fast. And the space field is really disparate. There are tons of nooks and crannies to go into and explore, from legal, operational, regulatory, compliance, and gosh, the end customer. Who'd have thought about that, right? So you can sign up for this. If you go to coldstartech.com/MSB, that's short for Make Space Boring, the mission we're on, then you can sign up, and in your email you will get a daily notification that the new video has been posted. I'm also thinking about doing some branded mini courses and summarizing papers as I'm able to. So those will be some goodies that are in there as well. So if you're interested in that, go to coldstartech.com/MSB and join us on the mission to make space boring.